As they circled around to the backyard to check a suspicious getaway car, they returned to find the sanitation worker lying in a pool of blood. The first person at the scene immediately became the prime suspect and was ruled out of the investigation. The autopsy revealed the victim died from a severe blow to the head, most likely with a coffee grinder that had disappeared from the scene. However, this was only the beginning of a premeditated conspiracy. This was just the start of a series of bizarre murders to come. Simply because he made a phone call before getting into his car, the man experienced a massive explosion. This incident was almost a terrorist attack. The police could only rely on the brilliant detective Will. He immediately arrived at the scene with his security team. The police set up a cordon. All the houses looked the same. The only unusual thing was that the garbage truck had arrived at the exact moment. A diamond earring lay on the ground. The victim, named Keith, worked in advertising. He had never been involved in any suspicious activities. The task force searched Keith's car and discovered the bomb was aimed at only one person. It didn't resemble terrorism, but rather a personal assassination. However, despite a thorough search, they couldn't find a clear reason why he would be the target. There was a suspicious advertisement for pool equipment in his house, but overall, the house didn't have a pool. According to the victim's family, they had no plans to build one. In contrast, Arthur's house across the street did have a pool. Letters between the two houses were often sent by mistake. Furthermore, Arthur drove a red sports car. Could the killer have killed the wrong person? The real target of the killer was Arthur. Hearing this, Arthur tried to flee, but Will quickly apprehended him. The police investigation revealed that Arthur was heavily in debt. He had borrowed money from many lenders. A few weeks earlier, he had declared bankruptcy, but he denied having any enemies. He also didn't believe he was the target. In the following days, Will and Faith followed Arthur. He acted erratically and completely lacked any sense of caution. If the killer wanted to murder him, it would be easy. The only strange thing was that Arthur always carried a large bag into the city. Inside were his personal belongings. As Arthur was about to drive away, a green car approached him. The person in the passenger seat raised a gun and fired at Arthur. In a panic, his bag was flung into the air and fell, spilling stacks of cash. The killer had struck twice in one day. At this point, Arthur could no longer hide the truth. Arthur handed all the money to Will and begged him to help transfer it to a bank account. Arthur admitted that the killer's real target was his son, Miles. A year earlier, Miles had committed a crime and gone to prison. Someone was using his son's safety to blackmail Arthur into paying £5,000 a month. Arthur had been secretly paying the money all along. Last week, a woman approached him to talk about Miles. He told her everything. Afterward, the group started trying to kill him. The bomb disposal team examined the C4 used in the explosion. The shipment was Russian military supplies. They suspected that some members of the bomb disposal team were smuggling the goods out to sell for extra money. The goods passed through many hands. It would take at least half a month to uncover the entire network. The police, in coordination with the prison, confirmed that Miles was frequently beaten. He was covered in injuries, but fortunately, they were not life-threatening. The blackmail call Will intercepted was from a discarded phone inside the prison. It's possible the entire incident was orchestrated from within the prison, including the assassination plot. Will asked his ex-girlfriend, Angie, about it. 6 months ago, while investigating a case, she suffered a serious injury. For nearly 2 months, she was unable to move and required rehabilitation and physical therapy. But she still tried to return to work, even forging a doctor's signature to get a rehabilitation certificate. She had handled a case involving a prison gang. They had even planned an assassination from within. But to this day, the police haven't caught the mastermind. Moreover, no one in prison dared to act as bait, because if they attracted the gang's attention, they would certainly lose their lives. The police found the abandoned car. Inside were the packaging of a type of handmade cookie. This brand has a branch in McKinleyville. The day before, Faith's friend, a reporter, provided a clue. He had previously written a report about a gang, most of whom lived in McKinleyville. Following this lead, Faith went to the bakery to question the owner. He identified several customers who matched the description of the person who had been following Arthur. At the same time, the police, using the bank's surveillance cameras, identified the woman as Emily. Her younger brother had been Miles's prison friend. As soon as she got into the car, Emily heard a strange sound. When she received the phone call, she learned that her roommate had planted a bomb in her car. The bomb disposal team was immediately deployed. Emily was sitting on the bomb's detonator. The removal process took time. Will sat beside her, reassuring her and asking about her situation, learning that she had been threatened just like Arthur. She had to transfer money into the criminal's account every month. It was said that at least 3 other prisoner families had also received similar threats. About half an hour later, the bomb disposal team successfully defused the bomb and saved Emily's life. It was a breathtaking rescue, but ultimately successful. Faith tracked down the bomb planter and discovered someone wearing the exact same type of diamond earrings found at the scene. They had enough materials in their house to make more than 10 more bombs. There was a notebook detailing the bombs they had made. Before detonating them, they would call the prison and use coded language to signal their actions. The next target was a car with 26 unpaid parking tickets. Coincidentally, yesterday the police station towed a suspicious blue truck to the depot. It contained a total of 20 tons of gasoline. If it exploded, it would burn down the entire building. Will immediately went to the depot and found the truck. Only 6 minutes remained. The police began evacuating everyone. Just as they cut the wire, the anti-detonation device detonated, leaving exactly 2 minutes. A second anti-detonation device activated. Only 30 seconds left. Cricket used the excuse of needing a shovel to ask Will to leave the scene. Then she grabbed the bomb and ran away. She swore she wouldn't let the bomb explode near the building. The moment the bomb exploded and flames erupted, she perished. After this incident, Will was determined to hunt down the mastermind behind everything. In the previous season, Will had caught a serial killer named James. At the same time, he discovered his true identity. James was his biological father. In the 1980s, James had murdered his mother. The villain would surely face a lifetime in prison. Although planting bombs wasn't James's style, he was very knowledgeable about the prison environment and the coded language used by bomb makers. However, he refused to say anything. Furthermore, there were 2,600 people using disposable phones. Finding the buyer would be extremely difficult. Meanwhile, Faith met privately with Miles. At the police's request, the prison had isolated him for protection. Miles feared eavesdropping, so he wrote down clues. The suspects always wore masks, so he couldn't see their faces, but their cells were nearby. At the same time, Angie heard that the bomb disposal officer, Cricket, had died. Worried about Will, she visited him and learned that he was investigating the case at the prison. Angie normally looked after a boy named Zoe. He had found work and was doing hard labor at a mansion. One day, Angie received a call from Zoe. He said that his boss, Common, seemed unusual. Upon hearing this, Amanda immediately checked Common's information. This man had 8 criminal charges on his record, but all were either withdrawn before trial or settled amicably. The accusers eventually disappeared. Amanda and Angie immediately went to Common's mansion. On the way, they talked about Angie and Will's unfinished love affair. Although there was some regret, in the end, everyone had to let go of what was fruitless, because only then could they become themselves, as fate had ordained. Nothing was too serious. Amanda didn't carry any weapons and didn't want to confront Common directly. She entered the mansion under the guise of a visitor, but she couldn't find Zoe because Common completely denied hiring any help. Amanda then called the Natural Resources Administration, using their authority to obtain a search warrant. Thanks to this, they successfully rescued Zoe. Meanwhile, Faith checked the prison's zoning plan. Each zone consisted of 6 cells. Miles' zone had 5 other inmates who were all suspects. Will persuaded James to use coded language to approach these suspects. The first suspect was a former professional assassin nicknamed Lingo. The second suspect, a chicken seller with a hot temper, became enraged and violent upon hearing James' coded language. Will immediately sensed something was amiss. He was certain this suspect was connected to the bombing. Sure enough, they found a discarded phone in his room. Inside was a call history that revealed his accomplice was Arthur. Arthur had shot and killed 5 people in a park 30 years ago. Currently, Arthur had serious kidney problems and was scheduled for a kidney transplant in 6 months. However, he maintained his innocence and completely denied any involvement. Will ordered the prison to isolate all suspects and investigate all financial flows connected to Arthur. That night, Mark, a member of the independent transport team, was attacked and suffocated before the police could arrive. Arthur also died in the bathroom in a very strange position. Behind his neck were marks of tight chains. Clearly, he had been strangled from behind. The cameras didn't capture the killer of Mark. The murder weapon was also unclear. The suspects at the scene all had evasive looks. Will, relying on their gazes, knocked on the windowsill. He discovered a hidden pile of medical waste. Checking the infirmary's cameras, they found Arthur had entered the room with a hidden man. It was the serial killer Jack, who had a questionable relationship with the nurse. After the murders, the nurse suddenly left work early. Coincidentally, James was Jack's lawyer. Will went to James to get a statement. At that moment, the prison lost power. An alarm blared. The power was cut, rendering the cell doors inoperable. Will was locked in the cell with James. From the ventilation shaft came the nurse's voice. She was repeating coded messages that Will had never been able to decipher, but James refused to reveal their meaning. Instead, he recounted a series of his past crimes. Overwhelmed with anger, Will lost control and attacked James. James finally confessed that the nurse was helping Jack escape. The two arranged to meet in the prison parking lot. Will immediately used the prison phone to contact Faith, but Faith couldn't leave because the prison warden had suffered a heart attack. Will quickly removed the battery from his phone to power the cell door. He arrived at the parking lot just before Jack left. By By then, the prison's power had been restored. The nurse was brutally murdered in the driver's seat. Jack had kidnapped Miles, using Miles's life to force Will to let him escape. Taking advantage of Jack's momentary distraction, Will tried to subdue him. But in an instant, Jack broke free, using a rope to strangle Will, leaving him nearly breathless. At this critical moment, James unexpectedly appeared and rescued Will. He then personally killed Jack. At this point, James was charged with another crime, claiming that everything he did was for Will's sake. But Will felt no gratitude towards the villain who had caused so much suffering. Before leaving, James revealed shocking information. Will's mother's younger brother, Anthony, was still alive somewhere in the world. The police worked tirelessly, devoting all their efforts to the case. That day, Will went to the rehabilitation center to visit Angie. But before they could say anything, he received a call from headquarters saying that a contractor had discovered a dead body in an abandoned building. The victim appeared to have been attacked downstairs, then ran upstairs and bled to death. The scene contained weapons such as kitchen knives, guns, etc. But the real murder weapon was a detached doorknob. It fit the doors in the building. This place had been abandoned since 1990, and many homeless people used it as a temporary shelter. From the corners covered in fingerprints, there was a lot of blood on the victim's body. Following the trail of blood, it was clear it came from another person. Will found a second body, killed by gunshot. The victim wore a distinctive church bracelet. Not far away was a woman's handbag containing a bottle of folic acid, indicating the owner, the third person present at the scene, was pregnant. Congressman Victor arrived at the police station and said that the city government would launch a $500 million redevelopment project next week. The abandoned building was the primary construction site. Amanda had little time left to solve the case. Will reevaluated the entire scene. The third woman was a survivor. The first victim had attacked her. The second victim, trying to protect her, was shot dead. In self-defense, she stabbed the assailant to death with a doorknob. She then dragged the second victim's body away from the scene, but exhausted, abandoned it and fled. Suspiciously, she never called the police. The first victim, Dale, was a professional assassin. The second victim was Conrad, the pastor's assistant. The survivor was Isabella, 22 years old and living alone. Her family didn't know she was pregnant. Conrad's parents didn't believe the police. They only cooperated when the pastor accompanied them. Isabella was also a believer, but she insisted that her relationship with Conrad was completely innocent. They had no illicit affair. She didn't reveal the father's identity. She planned to raise the child alone. The pastor said he hadn't seen Isabella in a long time and didn't know where she was, but Will felt he was lying. Isabella's apartment showed no signs of forced entry or vandalism. Only a parking permit was conspicuously placed. Will went to the church to investigate and discovered a woman behaving mysteriously. She entered the prayer room with the pastor. While waiting for the pastor, Will listened to the recording of Cricket, who had died in the previous explosion. Memories of the explosion resurfaced in his mind. The haunting feeling was inescapable. After the catechism session, the pastor invited Will to his home for a more in-depth conversation. He didn't feel there was anything wrong with being alone with a female parishioner. Take the woman he'd just spoken to, for example. Her child had undergone 5 breast surgeries. Each sermon held special meaning for her. The pastor and Will were similar. They wanted to do something meaningful. Perhaps because they had both experienced trauma, they sought to focus on external distractions to avoid difficult tasks like confronting their own vulnerability and self-worth. Faith discovered that the parking ticket came from Victor's office. Only then did she learn that Isabella had interned there. When Victor heard about her disappearance, his usually affectionate gaze immediately tensed. Fortunately, Victor's wife arrived in time to interrupt the interrogation. She even enthusiastically offered to help the police search for clues. But Faith, with her keen perception, sensed they were hiding something. The forensic report arrived very quickly. It matched Will's crime scene suspicions. The only difference was that the knife found at the scene had another set of fingerprints belonging to a man named Parker. This man had been wanted by the police for over 20 years for armed robbery. He was the current pastor. The pastor didn't deny his past crimes, but the knife at the scene belonged to the church kitchen. Anyone could have taken it. Perhaps Conrad carried it for self-defense. The pastor didn't really know who had a relationship with Isabella, but after much questioning, he finally revealed that after the murder, Isabella had sought him out in a state of panic. She said the child's father wanted to see her, but when she arrived at the meeting place, she was nearly killed. To protect her, the pastor took her to the church's refuge center for shelter. When Will and Faith arrived, the door had been smashed open. Inside, chaos reigned, and Isabella was missing. This refuge center was shared by several churches. Coincidentally, Counselor Victor was the investor in the remaining churches. Will rang the doorbell for a long time, but no one answered. A gunshot rang out, alerting them. They approached and witnessed Victor being shot dead by his wife. From here, the truth was revealed. The woman hated Isabella for her relationship with Victor. She had hired an assassin to kill Isabella, but Isabella managed to escape, so she tried again, this time holding Isabella captive in the mansion. Isabella's screams of pain as she was about to give birth echoed throughout the house. Faith quickly subdued Victor's wife on the second floor. Isabella and the baby were lucky to escape. Will bowed his head and told the child the words he had longed to hear as a child. Your mother will be all right. The pastor visited Isabella one last time. He also knew that it was time to atone for the crime from over 20 years ago. Before leaving, he told Will that he hoped they could both make peace with the darkness of the past. Will asks his best friend to help him contact his maternal uncle. However, he hasn't decided whether to acknowledge his family or not. Every time he thinks about family, he remembers his foster father, who caused him psychological trauma when he was sent to foster care. Although his friend says his foster father recently died of lung cancer, the dark shadow in his mind hasn't disappeared. Amanda reports another missing person case. In the neighboring town, a group of people had a party in the woods the night before. The next morning, only a young boy stumbled out of the woods, seeking help from passers-by. According to the surviving boy, Brad, RJ, Alex, and his girlfriend Nicole were all there that night. Shortly after, a boo-hag monster suddenly appeared and attacked them. Brad immediately fled, completely unaware of what happened to the others. Legend says the boo-hag is a creature that sucks souls. Its entire body is covered in moss and has rough bark-like skin. Between 1998 and 2006, the local area recorded 5 missing persons. Everyone believed it was boo-hag's doing. Will and Faith investigated the scene. In the darkness, they detected the smell of alcohol in the ground, but there were no empty bottles around. There were also no signs of a fight. A few strands of artificial grass were hanging from a tree branch. Clearly, someone had deliberately covered up the crime scene but left behind clues. Suddenly, a hand grabbed Will. This was the second survivor, RJ. He also claimed to have been attacked by boo-hag. The case also involved a female sorceress named Erica. Erica was a witch. Her roof was full of blackberries, and her house contained all sorts of feathers and jars. 4 boys had held a party at her ancestral graveyard, so she had to go there to clean up the scene. She also took away a bottle of alcohol that had been left unused for 7 years. There was no evidence to prove Erica's involvement in the case. She refused to cooperate with the police investigation. Will and Faith stayed in the area to continue their investigation. Faith confirmed that of the 5 previous missing people, 4 had died due to drunk driving. Because of their reputations, their families reported them missing and blamed boo-hag. Only one person, Kenneth, had been missing since 2016, and his whereabouts remained unknown. A reporter from afar contacted Faith to gather relevant information. That night, a strange phenomenon occurred. Hundreds of crows swooped down on the hotel where the man was staying, crashing through the windows and dying en masse. At the same time, local police received a report that goats on a farm had mysteriously disappeared. This happened several times a year, but this time, the culprit left footprints. Near the fence, there was grass identical to that found in a cemetery. The goat thief and the kidnapper were very likely the same person. Faith questioned Nicole's close friend and learned that Brad had pursued her. He wasn't a good person. He frequently bought alcohol for young women to satisfy his desires. The reporter brought a new clue. Kenneth's parents, who disappeared in 2016, had both passed away. A few months before his disappearance, Kenneth had been seen with Erica. He was the strongest of his peers. His shoe size was a 13, matching the footprints found on the farm. Could Kenneth still be alive? And if so, why would he fake his death and impersonate boo-hag to attack 4 innocent people? What role did Erica play in this case? Just then, a third survivor, Nicole, was found in the woods. However, her memory of the night of the incident was very vague. Perhaps she was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. She didn't dare try to recall it. Brad and RJ visited her at the hospital. With the intuition of a police officer, Faith sensed their ulterior motives and warned the hospital not to let anyone approach Nicole. The reporter received a phone call and hurried away. Faith and Will immediately followed him. Will went to the crime scene. Traumatic childhood memories suddenly flooded his mind. When Faith pressed him, he finally confessed his past. Their conversation made the reporter wary. He admitted that RJ had contacted him, saying he wanted to come to the scene to talk privately about the case. But when the 3 of them arrived, they only found RJ's body next to the tombstone. The blood was still very fresh, indicating that he hadn't been dead for long. There were feathers from Erica's house on the body. The police had always kept an eye on Erica. She had absolutely no chance of committing the crime. But what Will really wanted to ask was about Kenneth's past. It turned out Kenneth was a poor child. Erica had once given him shelter. After Kenneth disappeared in 2016, Erica hadn't heard anything from him. At this point, Will had gradually pieced together the whole case. He led his men to search the forest and indeed discovered a deep cave that could provide shelter. Kenneth was hiding inside. He wasn't a bad person. On the night of the murder, Brad, out of jealousy towards Alex, drugged Nicole's bottle of wine. Kenneth Edith witnessed this act and tried to protect the innocent couple. Buha was the one who thwarted this plot. The test results showed that the wine contained traces of drugs, enough to convict Brad. RJ's death was also caused by Brad. He committed this serious crime and ultimately paid the price for his actions. After the case concluded, Faith told Will that she could never fully understand his childhood experiences, but it was all in the past. He could retain those memories, but he would never be alone again. Thanks to Faith's understanding, Will finally mustered the courage to contact his uncle. He left a voicemail with the name Winchell. Amanda received a threatening phone call warning her to prepare to pay the price. At first, she thought it was just a joke. Unexpectedly, after her shift ended, she found a nail in the elevator. A threatening message read, "It's time." Before that, her car tire had suddenly gone flat. Her house keys were missing. Could all these things be related? Will, as usual, meticulously reasoned. The elevator camera had been removed. That night, only 6 people swiped their cards to use the elevator. Among them was a night shift cleaning staff member responsible for cleaning the area. This person had a long-standing feud with Amanda over cleaning duties. The 3 of them were about to go in and question the person when they heard a strange noise. Will and Faith went to the backyard to investigate and saw a car speeding away. When they returned, the cleaning staff member was lying on the ground, covered in blood. Amanda was the first to arrive at the scene. Because of this, she became the sole suspect. According to regulations, those closely associated with the victim are not allowed to participate in the investigation. Angie and Michael officially took on the case. The cleaning staff member's body had numerous lacerations and bruises. The cause of death was severe head trauma. The coffee maker in the kitchen suggests the victim had just made a cup of coffee before death. There were no clear signs of a struggle. It's possible an acquaintance was invited into the house and then an argument ensued. The perpetrator then used the coffee grinder on the table to strike the victim on the head before fleeing. However, the murder weapon has not yet been found. It seems this case is closely related to the series of threats Amanda is facing. Amanda admitted that years ago she apprehended a criminal carrying contraband named Chuck. Further investigation revealed that he was the perpetrator of a series of attacks on women. Coincidentally, he had recently been released and harbored a particular hatred for Amanda. However, Will looked into Amanda's eyes. He sensed she was hiding something important. Chuck's father still held a grudge from the past. He believed the city's police chief had deliberately framed his son. He knew his son well. Although his son wasn't a good person, he certainly wouldn't get involved with drugs. He worried the police would reopen the case, so he insisted on preventing Angie from meeting Chuck. The police were still trying to contact the cleaning lady's daughter, Leon. The two were very close, yet after the incident, Leon hadn't shown up. She didn't answer the police calls either. This made everything even more suspicious. Angie obtained a search warrant, paving the way for Will and Faith to investigate Amanda's house. There, they discovered a box of documents related to Chuck's case. Much of the crucial information had been erased. Meanwhile, Amanda was sitting in a cafe, reminiscing about the case from years ago. Suddenly, Chuck appeared and sat down opposite her. He said that if she admitted what she had done to him years ago, he would confess. Otherwise, she should prepare for the consequences. At the same time, Michael discovered a suspicious bag in Amanda's house. Beneath the clothes was the murder weapon the police had been searching for. No one would kill someone and then hide the murder weapon in such an obvious place. Clearly, someone had deliberately set a trap for Amanda. She was suspended from her job, and her former colleagues mocked her. Will and Faith were so angry they almost got into a fight. After calming down, Will suddenly remembered that Amanda had lost her house keys. Could the killer have stolen them and secretly hidden the weapon in there? Fearing she would be harmed again, he asked her to move in with him temporarily. The two of them brought up the case involving Chuck from years ago. Amanda no longer hid anything. She recounted that one night in 1995, when she was an investigator, she spotted a suspicious car while on patrol. The driver was Chuck, and there were many iron nails in the back seat. As she was about to question him, he suddenly lunged at her. Luckily, she escaped and hitched a ride from a passerby to get away from the scene. Later, she learned he was a professional criminal. Whenever he targeted someone, he would puncture the victim's tires and then follow them, waiting for an opportunity to strike. His movements were very secretive. The police had no evidence of murder. Because of fear of public opinion, none of the victims dared to come forward. A few weeks later, the police found a quantity of contraband on Chuck sufficient to constitute trafficking. Amanda had secretly placed those items on him to ensure he received a 30-year prison sentence, but she never felt she had done anything wrong. The police traced Leon's address and discovered she had been kidnapped. The forensic team found Chuck's fingerprints at the scene. They immediately went to his house. The noises coming from the warehouse caught their attention. The entire wall of the warehouse was plastered with Amanda's picture. Behind a concealed door, Leon was tied up. The police also found Amanda's house key there. This was proof that Chuck had framed Amanda. Just as Will and Amanda breathed a sigh of relief, a car suddenly sped towards them. After realizing his plan had failed, Chuck went berserk. He pulled out a gun and threatened to kill Amanda, but Will managed to fire 3 shots, killing him. Amanda was finally exonerated and returned to work at the police station. Will received a call from Antonio, arranging a meeting that evening. Will hugged his little dog and stood in front of his food cart, talking to himself to ease the tension. The moment Antonio saw Will, he embraced him and said that he looked so much like his mother, Lucy. Blood ties always have the power to draw people together. Although they had never met in half their lives, they shared a love for the same football team, suffered from dyslexia, and even tried to travel in the wrong direction. Antonio told Will many stories about his childhood and Lucy. Will, in turn, recounted all his life experiences. This was the first time in his life he felt a true connection with someone. They talked for hours, reluctant to part. Then the police called Will to inform him that a murder had occurred near a costume club. The victim was a famous judge named Deirdre. She had both supporters and enemies. Her body had been dumped in the back seat of a car and transported to an abandoned area to be disposed of. The fatal wound was a gunshot to the neck. But strangely, she, who always cared so much about her appearance, wasn't wearing any jewelry. There were traces of fabric on her body, possibly from a fight or a close embrace with the killer. Her handbag had been thrown in a trash can, and her hand bore the stamp marks of a nightclub. The initial crime scene was in a narrow alleyway with numerous bloodstains. Her phone was found nearby, along with a wet fleece scarf and a golden blonde wig. Not far from the scene was a spent bullet casing. It appeared the blonde killer had shot her and then used the scarf to stop the bleeding. Afterward, the killer put her in a car and fled, discarding her handbag to make it look like a robbery. On the corner was a nightclub that matched the handprint on her arm. It was a masquerade club where all the dancers were men disguised as women. The fact that a famous judge was in such a place surprised even Will. The club frequently received threatening letters, but when the owner learned the police were coming because of a murder, he immediately called a dancer named Gabe and said that his mother had been murdered. There was a man nicknamed Lido in charge of maintaining the high-end wigs. The cheap wigs found at the scene didn't belong to any of the wigs he had worked on. The police contacted Deirdre's family. Besides her son Gabe, she also had a husband, Dalton, and a daughter, Rowan, after her father's death. She remarried Dalton and brought Gabe and Rowan to live with them. Their relationship deteriorated. Gabe abandoned Rowan and left home. They hadn't seen each other for nearly 15 years. Gabe had promised to return and take Rowan back, but ultimately broke his promise as he couldn't even take care of himself. Recently, Deirdre wanted to mend the relationship, so she went to the club to find Gabe. Unsurprisingly, Dalton hated Gabe intensely. He even believed Gabe was the murderer. Dalton argued that Gabe had been rebellious since childhood, so it wasn't surprising if he committed murder. Police reviewed CCTV footage around the club and saw Deirdre wearing a lot of jewelry before her death. She had previously clashed with a man who organized protests against the club. He refused to cooperate with the police investigation, but during an argument with the dancers, he smashed Faith's car window. That was enough reason to arrest him. On the night of the incident, the man delivered protest leaflets to Deirdre, but she stepped on them. Then they argued. She slapped him in the face. He confirmed that she was wearing a lot of jewelry and a shawl at the time. Will and Angie returned to the club to investigate. Leto suddenly remembered that night. Before Deirdre left, she had asked him to deliver an envelope containing all her jewelry. The investigation revealed that she had been in a car accident the previous month caused by a drunk driver. 3 people died on the spot. Only she survived with a few bruises. After that life-or-death experience, perhaps she had reconsidered her life and regretted abandoning Gabe. That's why she brought the jewelry to apologize. This sounded very plausible, but surprisingly, Gabe went to the police station to confess and said that he was the one who caused Deirdre's death. His testimony was completely unreliable. He couldn't give a reason for the murder. He also misdescribed the victim's injuries and how the body was hidden. The police immediately realized he was trying to take the blame for someone else, and that person was the most important person in his life, the one he owed the most to, Rowan. Rowan had a gun, so when the police mentioned that detail, Gabe immediately knew who the real culprit was. He had sneaked into her house. He not only cleaned up all the evidence, but also left all her jewelry behind. He did it to atone for a promise he couldn't keep from years ago that he would take her away. The police didn't find Rowan at home. They surmised that she had taken the gun to the club. The dressing room was locked. Will broke in and sure enough found Rowan hiding inside. She confessed to everything she had done. Since Gabe left, she had become a scapegoat in her family. No one loved her. Dalton had never respected her. She thought killing Deirdre would lessen her hatred somewhat, but when she pulled the trigger, she realized it was too late. She also resented Gabe for abandoning her, which is why she left the wig at the scene to frame him. Finally, Rowan felt relieved. The two hugged each other tightly. It was a pity that after this hug, they didn't know when they would see each other again. As soon as Will arrived home, Antonio brought him a CD of Lucy's favorite songs from when she was alive. Just then, there was an urgent party requiring police representatives. After some thought, Will decided to take Antonio along. That night, with friends and family, Will's experience would certainly be unlike any lonely night before. The next morning, Faith took Will to a friend's wedding. This friend was an investment banker, and all the guests were from the upper class. Will wore a luxurious, custom-made suit. His friend, worried that carrying a gun would scare people, instructed the two police officers not to be armed. The entire room reeked of money. Some wore luxurious necklaces, others diamond-encrusted watches. But this was just the tip of the iceberg of the rich's life. Faith's son, Jeremy, was the MC for the wedding. They hadn't seen each other in a long time. Also present was a friend who used to act superior. She mocked Faith for making Jeremy drop out of college to do manual labor. She said Faith was just a petty investigator, every word laced with contempt. Will ordered a cocktail from the waiter. He looked around the room and noticed something strange. All the windows and doors were locked, seemingly to prevent anyone from entering. A woman bumped into Faith, spilling wine on her dress. Will accompanied her upstairs to change. Meanwhile, two groomsmen secretly took wine down to the cellar to drink and unexpectedly witnessed a murder. Jeremy was taken hostage shortly afterward. Immediately, the wedding scene descended into chaos. Three masked robbers with guns held over 50 guests hostage. They also set up a jamming device, preventing Faith from contacting the outside world for help. While Will was observing from the upper floor, he was discovered and taken hostage. He tried to calm Jeremy down, but there were always those who couldn't control their fear and tried to escape. In the end, they became victims. At this point, the police department hadn't received any notification. Angie and Michael were handling another murder case, but because the original investigation team had someone backing them up, their superiors ordered Angie to relinquish the case. Meanwhile, Jeremy recounted what he had seen in the basement. The robbers were trying to open a very large safe. A fourth robber emerged from the lobby. He looked like an emotionless commander. Will immediately devised a plan. He suggested removing the body to avoid causing too much panic. He and Jeremy hid the body, as the robbers had instructed. Then, Will, posing as a senior lawyer, said that if they only wanted something from the mansion, they should act quickly and leave as soon as possible. Waiting until the guests lost control would result in even more deaths and far more serious charges. He fabricated a series of criminal cases he had successfully handled, claiming he could help them defend themselves and get acquitted, as long as no one was killed. The robbers quickly realized one hostage was missing. Unbeknownst to them, Faith had secretly gone upstairs and was crafting a weapon from available materials. Soon after, the door opened. It was the bartender downstairs, who was also the fifth robber. The two men lunged at each other, and Faith was grabbed by the neck. In this desperate situation, she used the weapon she had made to fight off her attacker. At the same time, she discovered a fax machine under the table. She immediately thought of sending a distress signal to the police, but the pen she found had no ink. She tried to throw another pen to Jeremy for help, but the throw was too weak. He couldn't reach it and was almost discovered by the robbers. At that critical moment, another robber inadvertently covered up the bartender's death. Faith was lucky to escape. Then she learned the whole story from Jeremy. Afterwards, Will took a weapon from a guest and told him to pretend to have an asthma attack. Taking advantage of the opportunity when the robbers led him upstairs to get medicine, he passed the pen to Faith. She successfully sent a distress fax to the police station, but no one paid attention to the message. Will continued to try to persuade the robbers to stop. The ringleader hesitated, unsure whether to listen to him. Faith found a curling iron in the room and turned the temperature to maximum. Meanwhile, one of the robbers was checking Faith's bag in the bathroom. He discovered her police ID. He was about to report to his superiors, but she managed to use the bartender's walkie-talkie to change the communication frequency. The music in the room distracted the robbers, making them lose sight of their greed. They pointed their guns at the leader, wanting to take command. At this moment, another robber found Faith's hiding place. The two engaged in a fierce fight. Finally, Faith used a hot curling iron to burn the robber's face. She escaped danger and ran outside, but the robber received Faith's dropped phone. The lock screen clearly showed Jeremy's picture. He devised a new plan to kidnap Jeremy to force Faith to surrender. Meanwhile, someone discovered the distress fax. The mansion was completely sealed off by the robbers. All escape routes were blocked. Angie planned for the special forces team to infiltrate through the warehouse to eliminate the entire gang. The robbers then noticed Will's abilities and demanded that he open the safe in the basement. This was a number 8 lock, a structure resembling an engine with a series of interlocking gears. Will tried to open it, but accidentally activated the self-locking system, causing the robbers to become enraged and attempt to kill Faith and her son to vent their anger. However, they had already managed to open the gym door beforehand. The police also arrived in time to rescue them. Faith and her son were safe, suffering only minor injuries. The incident ended, but it left many buried memories in Will's heart. Angie, the person who understood him best, proactively suggested they go to his house to talk. They reminisced about their time together and spoke their hearts out. However, that night Will couldn't sleep well. He kept talking in his sleep, mentioning the name David, his adoptive father, the very person who had left the deepest psychological wound. Why did Will dream about David? His brain seemed to have activated a self-defense mechanism to prevent him from recalling those memories, but he still tried to recall the scene of the living room where he used to live. Images of him as a child kept appearing, but he refused to reveal anything. Suddenly, the moment he witnessed David shooting his foster mother, Anna, flashed through his mind. Just then, Antonio visited Will, abruptly interrupting his thoughts. The two were walking their dog. Not long after, Will received another call from the police. A body had been discovered at a construction site. A woman had a broken neck and had been chained to death. The autopsy confirmed she was Lily, the girl who had been missing for 13 years. She lived a very disciplined life, going to school, jogging, eating dinner at home, and babysitting for neighbors. On the morning she disappeared, she finished her run but never returned. Her boyfriend at the time was Derek, 19 years old. He was a delinquent and not accepted by Lily's parents. After 13 years, Lily's clothes had decomposed. Only the stitching indicated they were jeans. They couldn't have been her jogging attire. After her disappearance, a once happy family completely collapsed. Only the father remained, hoping that one day his daughter would return. The day Lily went missing, her parents were out. Her room was locked. They thought she was still asleep, but when they returned half an hour later, she was gone. At first, they thought she'd gone to exercise, but after hours of not being able to contact her, they felt something was amiss. There was an untitled drawing in her room. Will took a sample of leftover foundation from her room. He remembered how, as a child, she used to spray flour all over the house while playing cooking. Just then, Faith walked in, interrupting his thoughts. Lily's windowsill was very sturdy, so she could have easily sneaked out. They summoned Derek, but he had attended a party the night before the crime. They were just old friends who had long since lost contact, so no one could testify for him. Next, Will and Faith summoned Lily's neighbor and obtained a crucial clue. The neighbor's son from his previous marriage, Ethan, often comes home to stay for a while. Ethan's relationship with Lily was also quite good. On the day Lily disappeared, Ethan had a very good alibi. For almost 10 years, he had been going back and forth between prison and rehabilitation centers. At this point, Will's thoughts drifted back to the past. He saw the refrigerator of his foster family. What secret was hidden inside? Will suddenly remembered that David often threatened people in the house with a gun, so when he was a child, Will had hidden a gun in the refrigerator and the bullets in a flour container. But he had clearly hidden them all. So where did the gun David used to harm Anna come from? Will and Faith went to a youth protection organization, bringing Ethan's personal belongings. Among them was a Pecori illustrated book, the drawing style identical to the one in Lily's room. The last picture was a portrait of Lily. After 13 years, Ethan was still drawing Lily. They found him wandering the streets, but what surprised them was that 13 years ago, he had only spoken a few words to Lily. They weren't close at all. Those words were spoken when he secretly saw Lily's silhouette through the window of his father's room while staying at his father's house. Ethan's room was actually his father's study. This also meant that even when he wasn't there, his father was watching Lily. After the crime, one day, he found Lily's hair clip in his father's car. He was forced to live each day in fear, carrying the guilt until he ruined his own life. At the same time, Will also recalled the entire process of Anna's murder. In his youth, he didn't want to see the cruel David again, so he took the bullet out of the flour container himself. But because he was weaker, David snatched the gun from him. Anna rushed to protect him, leading to the tragedy. At this time, Antonio visited Will. He painfully confessed that it was all his fault. If it weren't for him, Anna, that gentle and kind girl, wouldn't have died at David's hands. Antonio comforted Will, assuring him that no one would blame a brave child. It wasn't his fault, never would be. With Antonio by his side, Will's mood finally calmed down. He had once been toyed with by fate, losing his whole life, but now things were different. There was someone with his mother's blood who would always be there for him. Besides Antonio, there was another person, Angie, who hadn't left him, even if only as his ex-girlfriend. The reason for their breakup was something they both understood implicitly and quietly forgot about, simply so they could be together better in the future. Faith questioned Albert, Ethan's father, alone. She demanded proof that he search his car. Lily's DNA was still found in the trunk. It turned out that night, when Lily secretly went out to meet her boyfriend, Albert saw her through the window. He immediately followed her and committed the cruel act. He just didn't expect that her death wouldn't be forgotten by the world. After several busy days, Will decided to use his vacation time to return to his mother's hometown with Antonio. He also brought his mother's death certificate, intending to have his name engraved on the tombstone. Antonio's friend, Harvey, recognized him. The two old acquaintances acquaintances chatted happily. Will, however, was quite unfamiliar with the local dialect. He seemed somewhat awkward. He greeted them and then left Antonio and his friend alone. Will went to the beach, listening to the local dialect through his headphones. He wanted to quickly integrate into the place and explore his mother's past. Antonio took Will to a family reunion. Relatives surrounded him, asking about his life over the years. But when Harvey heard that Will worked in law enforcement, his expression changed. At the same time, Angie was severely knocked down while chasing a criminal. Her old injury recurred. Her body was in the recovery phase, and she couldn't receive painkillers. The police department arranged for her to rest and recuperate. Will ended his vacation early to go and take care of Angie. The two were intimately involved when Antonio called to say that Harvey had died under mysterious circumstances. It was raining heavily that day, and besides Harvey, there was another dead body lying on the ground. Harvey had been under FBI surveillance for a long time. Will couldn't take over the case on his own, but he still went alone to examine the body. Harvey had 3 gunshot wounds to the chest, all at close range. At the foot of the mountain lay another body, also shot 3 times. There were 3 spent shell casings beside it, but the body was dry, indicating that he died before the rain started. He died before Harvey. Murphy arrived at the scene from the FBI. She completely ignored the local police and didn't reveal the identity of the other victim. Later, Will asked Antonio, and he learned that his mother's home island had previously belonged to Spain. After being occupied by another country, some volunteers called for the island's independence. The FBI immediately intervened and created files to monitor each of them for a long time. Antonio and Harvey had jointly stolen those documents and publicly pressured the FBI to apologize. Since then, both of them have been targeted. Perhaps Harvey's death was part of their elaborate revenge plan. The Bureau of Investigation assigned Murphy to the case. She nonchalantly used Will's office, even stealing the sheriff's assistant and his coffee. Murphy always acted arrogantly. She refused to reveal details of the case, only concluding that Harvey and the second victim had engaged in illegal dealings. They had a conflict and then a shootout. She even asked Will to persuade Antonio to cooperate with the Bureau of Investigation. Her purpose was clear. She was targeting him. The identity of the remaining victim was confirmed as Melton, a purveyor of defamatory information. Harvey had come from his hometown to buy documents to blackmail someone. But who was that person? The only person Will suspected was Murphy, because the case was closed, yet she still refused to leave. This showed she hadn't gotten what she needed. The 3 of them went to Melton's mansion. Melton's assistant had also unfortunately died. The Bureau of Investigation allowed them to search it. They had already searched it twice before. Almost everything of value in the house had been stolen. They simply overlooked the magnets attached to the refrigerator. One of them had a USB drive attached to the back. The police chief received a complaint from Murphy and immediately went to the mansion. He and Will examined the USB. Inside were defamatory documents. One of them was about Raphael, a real estate businessman, Harvey's rival, who had committed numerous murders. He also had financial ties to Murphy. She accepted bribes to cover up the case, but the documents were encrypted. The only person who knew the password, Harvey, had been murdered. Will devised a plan. He had the police officer deliver the USB to Murphy to force her to withdraw her complaint against Will. Murphy got what she needed, so naturally, she would leave. Just then, the police assistant brought Murphy's dry cleaning. However, as she approached, she accidentally spilled a drink on Murphy's clothes. Murphy immediately changed into her freshly laundered clothes and went to the parking lot. She coincidentally met Antonio there. He exposed the whole bribery scandal. He even said he had deciphered the password. Sooner or later, he would take her to court. She had used $10 million to bribe him. She cautiously approached him and unexpectedly snatched the gun, intending to kill him. But when she pulled the trigger, she discovered there were no bullets inside. It turned out to be a trap. The police chief had planted a listening device in her clothing and recorded the entire conversation. All that was needed was more time to decipher the encrypted documents to convict Murphy. After everything was settled, Antonio said goodbye to Will. He still wanted to live on this small island. Before leaving, Antonio advised Will to quickly propose to Angie, but no one expected that the next major case would be enough to completely ruin the future of both of them. As soon as Will returned to the police station, he felt the heavy atmosphere weighing down on him. The reason was that a few days earlier, the police had received a confidential case. The victim's name was Jason. He was a criminal involved in multiple sexual assaults. His body was found in the woods, with a toy still in his mouth. Police checked their database and discovered that a few weeks earlier, a similar case of asphyxiation had occurred nearby. The perpetrator was also an assailant and also had a toy in his mouth. Some people, driven by emotion, had publicly shared information about these assailants online. They believed these individuals deserved punishment and even obstructed the police investigation. This made solving the case extremely difficult. To date, the police have had no leads. A week passed in vain. Faith rushed to report report that another body had been found in the woods. The victim's name was Blake. Based on the degree of decomposition, the death was estimated to be about 4 months prior. The killer's methods were identical to the previous cases. This was clearly a large-scale, meticulously planned serial murder. Blake was most likely the first victim. Each victim wore glasses, and their fifth and sixth ribs were broken. Will seemed to have figured something out. He asked the forensic team to conduct a separate examination of the bodies. On his way home, Will continued to ponder the series of cases. He suddenly saw Blake lying on the floor. A flash of insight struck him. He understood how the killer committed the crime. The body posture was identical to a painting called Nightmare. His colleague also told him that there was a red ticket in the victim's pocket. At the same time, the independent test results arrived. Traces of muscle relaxants were found in the victim's bodies. Will became even more certain of his suspicion. The killer was a young woman who injected muscle relaxants into the victims. Then she sat on their chests, slowly watching them suffocate to death. This type of crime clearly motivated a vengeful pleasure. It's possible to infer that she suffered severe psychological trauma during her adolescence. Will's colleagues questioned the origin of the red ticket. Only one ice rink sold such tickets, and that place was dirty, chaotic, and dangerous. The cashier didn't recognize the victims, but most of the men who came there were disreputable, including a man wearing glasses. He came at least twice a day. A social media link was written on the restroom wall. The cashier secretly memorized it. The man with glasses refused to admit any wrongdoing. He even mocked the police. He said he loved his wife and children very much and absolutely wouldn't do anything shameful. But just one day later, the police discovered his body. Before he died, he had logged into social media. One account had a very suspicious strawberry avatar. The user of this account had met him in person. Just one day before, a reporter had provided Faith with a crucial clue. The victim was a truck driver who had died 6 months prior. He was transporting muscle relaxants. However, after his death, his truck's cargo bed was empty. This indicated that the police had figured out how the killer obtained the medication. At the scene, police found a strawberry-shaped necklace. Faith suspected that the strawberry avatar online belonged to the killer. Police tracked the account's activity and quickly discovered she had contacted a new victim. She arranged to meet them in a secluded forest outside the city. A figure was lurking ahead. The two officers immediately became alert, but upon closer inspection, it was Angie. Time rewinds to Monday. Due to a relapse of an old injury, she was resting at home. The police chief personally visited her and brought the good news that the headquarters would promote her. She was very capable. Despite having been traumatized by abuse in her childhood and having been involved with illegal substances, she has completely turned her life around. Her observational and analytical abilities were far superior to those of the average person. The police chief was very pleased with the decision from her superiors. She immediately shared the good news with her best friend. Turning around, she saw a girl named Crystal waiting for her. Crystal was also a pitiable figure. Her mother's new boyfriend had severely hurt her. She had become angry and fought back in self-defense, but this caused her mother to become frightened and decisively move away. Her mother cut off all contact with her. Angie empathized with Crystal because their pasts were very similar. She took Crystal to many group therapy sessions. Crystal loved cartoon toys. This was something Angie remembered well. When the police took on the series of serial murders, Angie saw a picture of the toy on the clue board. A strong sense of unease welled up inside her. She went to Crystal's room and saw many pairs of glasses on the board. Her anxiety grew stronger and stronger. Angie traced Crystal's phone location and found a forest on the outskirts of town. Angie witnessed Crystal preparing to commit the crime. Heartbroken, Angie wanted to pull Crystal out of the abyss, but Crystal refused Angie's kindness. She ran deep into the forest. As she was about to cross a stream, she slipped, her head hitting a sharp rock. Her body was swept away by the current. Angie was the last person to see Crystal's lifeless corpse floating in the stream. At this point, Angie revealed the truth from years ago. It turned out that Crystal's mother's boyfriend was the first victim. Out of pity for Crystal, Angie had concealed all the evidence to help her. Angie thought she could save Crystal, but she didn't realize the psychological wounds would never heal. Crystal spiraled downwards, unable to turn back. When Crystal's mother came to the police to claim her daughter's body, she finally showed some remorse. But she still blamed Angie, saying that if Angie hadn't deliberately covered up the incident, Crystal might not have fallen so deep into crime. In the end, she still refused to admit that it was Crystal's indifference to her emotional needs that was the cause. Will couldn't sleep all night. He remembered the days of his youthful love with Angie. The beautiful memories haunted his mind like a spell. As soon as dawn broke, he went straight to the police station. Seeing Angie's lonely figure made his heart ache. If he could, he would propose to her right then and there. They didn't need a lavish wedding. They just needed the witness of their colleagues. A marriage certificate would suffice. They would live together for the rest of their lives, have many children. Until they were old, they would still still hold each other every night. In Will's mind, he had already planned to spend his whole life with Angie, but in reality, he couldn't betray the oath he took when he first joined the police force. Looking into Angie's eyes, he could only say one thing: she was arrested. She only replied that she thought he would choose her. Will disappeared, taking his dog with him. He didn't say where he was going, nor when he would return. Was it an escape? Perhaps the moment he personally apprehended the woman he loved, he knew he wasn't strong enough to face this ending. The film ends here. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you again.